My parents left 2 empty chairs in the front row of my wedding, then told me they had chosen my sister's birthday cake instead. I was 35, a senior bookkeeper in Ashford County, and I had spent more than 6 years quietly paying to keep their house standing. They called me cold. They said I abandoned them. They let my sister tell the whole town I cut off my disabled father because I got married. I did not scream. I did not post. I saved every transfer, every record, every date. And 6 months later, in front of 187 people at a VFW hall, my family learned the difference between a daughter who shows up on Facebook and a daughter who pays the mortgage. Chapter 1. There were 60 chairs inside Grace's Lutheran Church on October 12, 2024. And I could see every single one from where I stood behind the sanctuary doors. White ribbons were tied to the aisle pews. A fall wreath hung near the pulpit. The organist had already played the same soft loop twice, trying to make waiting sound intentional. Pastor Helen Greer stood near the altar with her Bible open in both hands, glancing toward the back doors every few seconds, like patience was something she could stretch if she held still enough. I was 35 years old, wearing a simple ivory dress I had bought with my own money after comparing prices for 3 weeks. Nothing about me was extravagant. I was a senior bookkeeper and tax preparer at Adler and Pike Tax Services in Ashford County, Ohio. My whole adult life had been built on careful math, on making things balance, on knowing exactly what I could afford and what I could not. But there is no column in a ledger for the cost of looking at the front row on your wedding day and seeing 2 empty chairs reserved for your parents. The signs were there in neat black script. Parents of the bride, Lyle and Nadine Calloway. My father was 64. My mother was 61. Their names sat there like a promise someone had printed before knowing it would be broken. Graham Rowan stood at the altar in a dark blue suit, his hands folded in front of him, his shoulders square. He was 37, a licensed general contractor, and the owner of Rowan Homeworks LLC. Graham was not a man who filled silence with pretty words. He fixed rotted porch steps. He measured twice before cutting. He showed up when he said he would. And from the front of that church, he looked at me like he was trying to hold me steady from 30 feet away. Pastor Helen stepped closer to the aisle and checked her watch again. A few guests turned toward the doors behind me. Someone coughed. Someone whispered. The room had that restless feeling people get when they realize something painful is happening in public, and no one knows where to put their eyes. I kept telling myself my parents would come in at the last second. Maybe Dad's back had locked up. Maybe Mom had written the time down wrong. Maybe their car had trouble on County Road 7. I was still giving them excuses because daughters do that. Even grown daughters. Even daughters who should know better. Then Etta Rowan stepped out of the front pew. She was Graham's mother, 64 years old. A widow who had worked most of her life as a school cafeteria manager and still carried herself like she could calm a room full of hungry children with one look. She came to me slowly, not with pity, not with panic, just with purpose. She saw the way I was swallowing humiliation like it was part of the ceremony. She reached for my hand and said, "This time you don't walk alone, that was all." No speech. No dramatic apology for people who had not earned one, just her warm hand around mine. When the organ changed, Etta walked me down the aisle in the place where my mother should have been. I felt every face turn toward us. I felt the empty chairs to my left like cold air. I did not cry. I kept my chin level. Because if I looked down, I knew I might not make it to Graham. The ceremony was beautiful in the way painful things can still be beautiful. Graham's voice shook once when he said always, and a few people smiled softly. Pastor Helen spoke about patience, loyalty, and building a life with honest hands. Graham squeezed my fingers when I forgot to breathe. Etta sat in the front row, not in the seat marked for my mother, but close enough that I could feel her willing me through it, and still, through every vow, every prayer, every small laugh from the congregation, I saw those 2 empty chairs. They were not just chairs. They were every dinner where my sister's name came first. Every phone call where my mother told me Sloan had stopped by again. Every holiday where I brought receipts and practical help. And Sloan brought Poppy and a pie and got called the daughter who showed up. After the ceremony, after the little cake in the fellowship hall and the hugs from people, trying not to mention what everyone had noticed. I sat in the passenger seat of Graham's truck with my dress gathered in my lap. I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring, and the first thing I heard was music. Then children laughing, paper plates, someone shouting from a yard. That unmistakable bright noise of a party in full swing. Not a hospital, not an emergency room, not the side of a road, not any of the excuses I had kept alive for 2 hours so my heart would not have to name what had happened. "Mom," I said, "where are you?" Nadine's voice came through tight and distracted, like I had interrupted her while she was carrying a cake. "Maren, honey, we're at Sloane's birthday bash. You knew she was having people over." I closed my eyes. Her birthday was 3 days ago. There was a pause, then my father's voice came on. Lyle Calloway did not sound embarrassed. He sounded annoyed that I had forced him to explain something he considered obvious. "You don't need us now," he said. "You've got Graham." I looked at Graham through the windshield reflection. He was standing outside the truck, one hand braced on the hood, giving me privacy he knew I should not have needed. I did not yell. I did not beg them to come. I did not ask why a barbecue mattered more than watching their oldest daughter get married. I lowered the phone into my lap and said, "They chose cake. To understand how deliberate it was, you need to know the dates." My sister Sloane Mercer was 29, a hairstylist and booth renter at Glamour Loft Salon. Her actual birthday was October 9. Mine and Graham's save the dates went out in June 2024. One of them had been on my parents' refrigerator for 4 months, held up by a magnet shaped like a little red barn. The church was booked. Pastor Helen was confirmed. The fellowship hall had been reserved for a small cake and coffee reception after the ceremony. Everyone knew October 12 was my wedding day. Then, on September 15, Sloane posted on Facebook that she was throwing an all-day birthday bash on October 12. Barbecue, cake, karaoke, family only. I called her that same afternoon. I tried to keep my voice even. I asked why she would plan it for my wedding day when her birthday was October 9. She laughed once and said, "You don't get to own a whole Saturday just because you bought a white dress." I asked her to have it on her actual birthday. She said weeknights were inconvenient. I asked her to have it after the ceremony. She said she was not planning around me. I asked about Sunday. She said people had lives. When I called my mother, Nadine told me Sloane had been fragile since June and I should not make things harder for her. June Mercer was Sloane and Dane's baby girl, lost in 2022. That grief was real. I would never compare a wedding day to the loss of a child. But grief does not give anyone permission to turn another woman's wedding into a loyalty test. And that was what Sloane had done. She did not need October 12. She needed my parents to choose her on October 12. In my family, presents counted more than sacrifice. Sloane lived 6 minutes from my parents' house and brought her 5-year-old daughter, Poppy, there almost every morning. She drank coffee in Mom's kitchen, posted pictures from the porch, let Poppy leave toys in the living room. Nadine called her the daughter who showed up. I lived 45 minutes away on Maple Hollow Road. To most people, that was not far. To my mother, it was abandonment with a mileage estimate. I did not sit at her kitchen table every morning, but I was present in ways nobody photographed. Bank transfers, tax gaps, medical bills, house support. Things that did not get likes or heart emojis. That night, after Graham and I got home, I sat on the edge of our bed and opened Facebook. Sloane had posted a photo from the party. Lyle, Nadine, Sloane, Dane, and Poppy stood around a grocery store sheet cake with pink candles. My father had one arm around Sloane. My mother was smiling like nothing in the world had been missed. The caption said, "Grateful for the family who shows up." There was no congratulations, no apology. No mention of me. I did not comment. I did not message her. I did not defend myself to people who had already decided a cake was more important than a vow. I took off my wedding shoes, lined them beside the closet, and hung my dress over the bedroom door. The next morning, before Graham woke up, I sat at the kitchen table with my banking app open. 3 recurring transfers stared back at me. Transfers I had let run for more than 6 years. For the first time, I did not see them as responsibility. I saw them as evidence. Chapter 2. Before they became evidence, they had been favors. That was what I called them in 2018. When my father's voice first came through my phone sounding flatter than usual, like he had swallowed all the fear before it could reach me. Back then, Maren Calloway was still the kind of man who believed a person's worth could be measured by how long he could stand on concrete without complaining. He had worked as a press operator at Benton Auto Components for most of my life. He left before sunrise, came home with oil under his nails, and treated sick days like moral failures. In our house, needing help was something other people did. Then in May of 2018, during a long shift, he twisted wrong while moving a part he had probably moved 1,000 times before. There was no dramatic machine accident, no ambulance scene anyone could retell at church. Just one sharp movement, one sound in his back, and a life that suddenly had paperwork instead of overtime. Disability took time. Bills did not. My mother, Nadine, was working part-time at Dollar General then. She could cover groceries, gas, maybe the electric bill if nothing else went wrong. But the house at 1186 County Road 7 had a mortgage, taxes, insurance, and a way of turning one missed month into 3 envelopes on the kitchen table. When Dad called me in June, I was 29 and already working at Adler and Pike Tax Services. I understood mortgage schedules. I understood late fees. I understood that a house does not fall apart all at once. It starts with one payment sliding, one escrow shortage, one notice someone hides under a stack of grocery coupons. He did not say please. He did not say, "I'm scared." He said, "I need you to cover the shortfall for a few months. Just until the disability paperwork settles. A few months." That phrase did more damage to my life than any insult he ever threw at me. because it sounded temporary enough to be reasonable, so I said yes. I set up the first transfer that week, then another. Then a separate one when the escrow account came up short. Then an occasional reimbursement when Dad's pain management appointment needed a copay, or when physical therapy went self-pay for a visit, or when a back brace had to be replaced. I did not pay one dramatic bill that made me look noble. I paid the boring ones, the ugly ones. The ones families do not post about because they come with account numbers and due dates. By the end, the system was about $1,260 a month. House support, escrow and tax gap, insurance shortfall, medical gaps when they landed too hard. At first, I kept a little note in my budget that said temporary help for Mom and Dad. After 6 months, I changed it to family support. After a year, I stopped naming it at all. Every time I thought about stopping, Dad had a reason. The paperwork is still a mess. Your mother can't handle another scare. The tax bill hit harder than I expected. You know what losing this house would do to Nadine? That last one always worked. My mother had lost her own mother, Ruth Calloway, in a car accident when she was young. Loss had carved something permanent in her. She did not talk about it often, but she lived like every person she loved was already halfway out the door. I told myself I was protecting her. I told myself Sloane was helping in her way, by being there in the kitchen, by bringing Poppy over, by keeping Mom company when I was 45 minutes away on Maple Hollow Road. That was the bargain I made in my head. Sloane gave presents, I gave money, and only one of those ever seemed to count. Mom would call and say, Sloane was here this morning, or Sloane brought blueberry pie, or Sloane painted my nails while Poppy watched cartoons, and I would be standing in the copy room at Adler and Pike, holding a check request or a tax folder, knowing I had just sent enough money to keep their mortgage from tipping sideways. Still, in my mother's voice, I could hear the same message every time. Sloane showed up. Maren moved away, no one thanked me for the transfers. Not really, Dad would sometimes say, got it, like I'd emailed him a form. Mom usually did not know the full amount. At least, I told myself she did not. That made it easier. It let me believe the silence was not cruelty. It was ignorance. Miles Adler was the first person who ever made me question that Miles was 67, a CPA with half-moon glasses and a talent for seeing through people while pretending to look at a spreadsheet. I had worked at Adler and Pike since 2013. I kept books for bakeries, church accounts, contractors, small salons, feed stores, and a few landlords who always forgot that receipts mattered until April. Miles used to say, numbers don't flatter, Maren. They don't gossip either. That's why people hate them. By 2024, he was talking about retiring and selling me the firm. Not handing it to me, selling it. Properly, legally, with financing I could manage and a name I could build on. It was the first dream I had allowed myself that was not tied to keeping someone else's life from collapsing. Graham knew about the money. He never liked it, but he never ordered me to stop. Sometimes he would come in from a job, still smelling like sawdust and cold air, and find me at the kitchen table with my laptop open. He would ask, do they understand what this costs you? And I would say, it's temporary. The last time I said it, he leaned against the counter and looked at me for a long second. Maren, he said, temporary things don't usually last 6 years. I had no answer for that. The morning after our wedding, the answer was sitting in my hand. I canceled the house support transfer first. My thumb hovered over the screen longer than I want to admit. Then I pressed confirm. I canceled the escrow and tax gap next. The automatic reimbursement account for medical costs. I paused instead of deleting. I was angry, not inhuman. If Dad needed something basic and real, I would look at it. But no more automatic money. No more invisible daughter on autopay. When I added it all up, from June 2018 to October 2024, nearly $96,000 had left my life to keep my parents' house standing. Graham came into the kitchen barefoot, his hair still messed from sleep. He saw my face, then the banking app on the table. What did you finally stop doing? He asked. I looked at the screen, paying to be invisible. He did not smile, he did not celebrate. He just nodded and said, about time. 3 weeks later, Dad called, no hello. No how was the rest of your wedding, no apology for the empty chairs. He said, the bank said the payment didn't come through. Ashford County Savings had finally noticed what my parents never had. I said I stopped the transfers. Silence in the background. Mom asked, who is it? Dad did not answer her. Then he lowered his voice and said, Maren, don't start acting like this. Something inside me went very still. You told me I didn't need you because I had Graham, I said. So I decided you didn't need my bank account either. He hung up. The story started changing before the week was over. Sloane posted first. Some people get married and forget who raised them. Bev Hollis, one of Mom's church friends, commented with a red heart. Then another woman from Grace Lutheran wrote that family should come before pride. By noon, people who had watched my parents skip my wedding were comforting my mother for being abandoned. At Glamour Loft Salon, Sloane told clients I had cut off Mom and Dad to punish everyone. She said I had always been jealous. She said Graham had filled my head with ideas. At County Feed and Supply, Dane told anyone who would listen that my husband had turned me against my real family. A few days later, I walked into Dollar General for laundry detergent and saw my mother at the register. She looked at me, then looked away like I was a stranger who had disappointed her. She did not know the whole truth. Or maybe she did not want to. Either way, she had chosen the easier story. Sloan was fragile, Dad was disabled. Maren was cold. Then the lie reached my work. Ray Sutton, who owned a small bakery and had trusted me with her tax records for years, called Adler and Pike and asked for Miles. I heard his office door close. 15 minutes later, he came out with that quiet look he got when a number did not match. He did not accuse me. He only said, Ray wanted to know if you were stable enough to keep handling her account this season. She heard you were cutting off your sick father. I felt the room tilt, but only a little. Bookkeepers are good at staying upright while things fall apart on paper. Miles took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Small towns don't need facts to damage a name, he said. That night, after everyone left Adler and Pike, I sat alone in my office surrounded by tax folders, mileage logs, payroll reports, and receipts paper-clipped into obedient little stacks. For the first time I understood that Sloan had not only taken my wedding day. She was reaching for the reputation I had spent 12 years building. Chapter 3, and once I understood that, I stopped waiting for the truth to defend itself. I still did not post anything online. I did not write a long paragraph about loyalty or betrayal. I did not take a screenshot of Sloan's little Facebook sermon and put it next to 6 years of bank transfers for the world to compare. People think silence means you have nothing to say. Sometimes it means you are putting your documents in order. The house at 1186 County Road 7 started making noise almost immediately after I stopped paying for its silence. Ashford County Savings sent a notice when the payment did not land the way it usually did. Then came the escrow warning. Then the property tax reminder. The kind of folded paper that looks harmless until you understand what happens when people keep ignoring it. A few medical costs that used to pass quietly through my account stopped passing quietly through anything. I did not know all of that right away. Not from my father. Maren Calloway would rather swallow a nail than admit a bill had scared him. What I learned later was that he started hiding envelopes in the glove box of his truck. Bank envelopes. County envelopes. Anything with a return address that might make my mother ask the wrong question. One afternoon, Nadine found one while looking for a napkin. Dad told her, "It's paperwork. I'm handling it." And Mom, because she needed that to be true, believed him. That was the thing about my mother. She called me cold because I lived 45 minutes away, but she had spent years living inches from the truth and still refused to touch it. Meanwhile, the story Sloan had planted kept growing roots. Bev Hollis told the church ladies that my mother had cried all morning because I had turned cruel after getting married. Sloan told clients at Glamour Loft Salon that I was punishing Dad for not making me the center of the universe. Dane told men at County Feed and Supply that Graham had turned me against my real family. I heard versions of myself from people who had never asked me one question. At Adler and Pike, a client stared at me too long while dropping off a payroll folder. Another woman lowered her voice when I walked into the lobby, then smiled like I had not seen it. Ray Sutton still had not sent over the bakery documents she normally brought in before the first week of January. Miles Adler called me into his office the second Tuesday after New Year's. He closed the door gently, which somehow made it worse. "Maren," he said, "the offer to buy into the firm is still on the table." I nodded because my throat had gone tight. "But you need to understand something. Reputation is an asset. You won't find it on a balance sheet, but in a county like this, it matters as much as cash flow." "I know." He leaned back in his chair, those half-moon glasses low on his nose. "Once people decide you can't be trusted with family, they start wondering if you can be trusted with their money." That was the first time I felt real fear. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I understood exactly how many wrong stories had destroyed good women before they ever got to answer. A few days later, Miles sent me to the Ashford County Recorder's office for a title search on a small property one of our clients was buying outside town. It was routine work. Pull the parcel, check the liens, confirm there were no surprises hiding under pretty listing photos. Caroline Keene was at the front desk that morning, silver hair clipped back, reading glasses hanging from a chain. She was 54 and had worked around county records long enough to know that every family in Ashford had something filed somewhere. She walked me through the public lien system after the computer froze twice. "Records don't care if people are embarrassed," she said, tapping the monitor. "They just sit there until somebody asks." I found the client's file, printed what I needed, and should have left. Instead, I sat there with my hand on the mouse, staring at the search bar. Then I typed in 1186 County Road 7. My parents' address appeared. The old mortgage was there, the one I already knew too well. Nothing surprising at first. I almost laughed at myself for looking. Then I saw the newer entry, home equity line of credit. Recorded March 2024. Amount $42,000. Secured against 1186 County Road 7. Borrowers and cosigners, Lyle Calloway and Dane Mercer. I read Dane's name once, then again. Then a third time, because my mind rejected it the first two. Dane did not live in that house. Dane had not answered my father's call in June of 2018. Dane had not covered tax gaps or escrow shortages. Dane had not sat at my kitchen table after midnight, moving money between accounts so my parents would not lose the place. My mother claimed she could not survive losing. But Dane's name was on the line. I must have gone very still, because Caroline looked over. "You all right, honey?" I pointed at the screen. "This is public, right?" "A recorded lien is public record. Anyone can request it. Does it show what the money was for?" She shook her head. "County record won't tell you purpose. That would be between the borrowers and the lender. That mattered. Even through the shock, the bookkeeper in me registered the boundary. No private bank information, no gossip. Just a public lien sitting in a public office with my father's name and my brother-in-law's name tied to the house I had kept current for 6 years says. I printed it. Then I went back to my office and started building the timeline. The HELOC was recorded in March 2024. In April, Dane had posted a picture of a newer Ford F-150, silver polished, parked outside County Feed and Supply. His caption said, "Finally upgraded." The same month, Sloan posted from Glamour Loft Salon, smiling beside 2 new hydraulic chairs and a mirror station. Her caption said, "New season, new station." In an old story she had saved, there was half an invoice on the counter behind a coffee cup. Not enough for a courtroom, maybe, but enough for a sister who knew how to read what people accidentally left in the frame. I did not need a banker to tell me what had happened. Sloan and Dane had bragged about it themselves. I printed the HELOC record. I saved screenshots of the truck, the salon chairs, the invoice corner. I printed my own transfer history from June 2018 to October 2024. My bank records. My money. My proof. Then I created a folder on my laptop and named it County Road 7 Records. I did not cry until after the folder was saved. The wedding had hurt because my parents had not chosen me. This was different. This meant the money I had sent, the overtime I had worked, the vacations I had skipped, the repairs Graham and I had postponed. All of it had helped build equity in a house my father used to help Sloan and Dane. They did not just choose her over me on my wedding day. They had been choosing her with my money. Dane came to my house 2 days later. Graham was in the garage, sanding down a cabinet door for a client, when Dane's truck pulled into our driveway like he owned the gravel under it. I was standing on the porch before he reached the steps. He looked past me toward Graham. "That loan has nothing to do with you." Graham wiped his hands on a rag and walked out slowly. It became her business when her paycheck kept that house current for 6 years. Dane's jaw tightened. "You need to keep your wife out of Calloway business." Graham stepped closer. Calm enough to make Dane look smaller. "Maren doesn't need me to keep her out of anything. She needs you to stop hiding behind her money." For a second, Dane looked like he wanted to swing. Then he looked at me and said the sentence people always used when they had no defense. "You don't know what Sloane's been through." I felt tired all the way down to my bones. "I know about June," I said. "I also know grief doesn't make someone else your bank." He left without answering. That night, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. It was Sloan. "If you try to embarrass Dad over paperwork, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of daughter you really are." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I walked to my desk and opened the folder. Inside were the save the date from June 2024. Sloane's birthday bash post from September, nearly $96,000 in transfer history, the $42,000 public HELOC lien, screenshots of Dane's Ford F-150, Sloane's salon chairs, the property tax notice, and a 1-page timeline clean enough for any client file. I closed the folder. For the first time, I understood I did not need to make a scene. I only needed to stop letting them lie while I was holding the truth. Chapter 4. For a while, that was enough. I kept the folder saved on my laptop, printed a copy, and slid the papers into a plain navy folder I had once used for a church payroll audit. I did not wave it around. I did not call my mother and threaten her with it. I did not send Sloane a single screenshot, even though my hands itched more than once when another one of her little posts showed up on my feed. People who have never been lied about always think the truth should feel powerful. It does not, at first. At first, the truth feels heavy. It sits in your desk drawer while people smile at you in Dollar General, like they know something shameful about you. It waits while your sister collects sympathy, and while your father lets your name burn, because admitting you kept his house standing would cost him his pride. I might have let it sit there forever if Etta Rowan had not shown up one Sunday afternoon, with a casserole dish, a garment bag, and the particular expression of a woman who had already decided the matter without needing my approval. She came through our kitchen door like she had done it 100 times, set the casserole on the counter, and looked at the wedding dress still hanging in the spare room. "No," she said. Graham looked up from the sink. "No what?" Etta pointed toward the hallway. "No, that is not going to be the only memory she gets in that dress." I tried to laugh it off. "Etta, I don't need another party." She turned to me, soft but firm. "It is not another party. It is the room you should have had the first time." I looked down at my hands. "People will talk." "People are already talking," she said. "At least this time they can do it while looking at you." That was Etta. She could make kindness sound like a dare. She wanted to hold a second reception at VFW Post 9148 on April 12, 2025, exactly 6 months after the wedding. Nothing fancy. Coffee, cake, paper plates, old songs, folding chairs, the kind of celebration that did not pretend to be richer than it was. She knew Tori Whitcomb, the 41-year-old manager there, and by Monday morning Tori had already penciled in the hall. I told Graham I was not sure. He sat beside me on the porch steps that night, elbows on his knees, looking out at Maple Hollow Road. "If you want to forget the whole thing, I will help you forget it," he said. "If you want to stand in that dress in front of people who actually love you, I will stand next to you." "You don't think it looks pathetic?" He turned to me. "I think what they did was pathetic. I think letting Etta give you something back is not." So Etta started planning. She called the bakery. She borrowed a sound system from a retired music teacher. She talked Tori into letting Graham and 2 of his crew from Rowan Homeworks LLC come in the week before to patch a soft place in the wall, sand a rough strip of floor, and hang simple warm lights along the back beam. Graham did not make a performance out of it. He just came home one evening with pain on his wrist and said, "If this room is going to hold your memory, it should be solid." Etta took my dress home and adjusted the shoulder seam herself. She said the first time I wore it, I had been bracing for impact. The second time, I should be able to breathe. She also set 2 chairs in the front row when Tori showed us the floor plan. But she did not mark them parents of the bride. I noticed Etta noticed me noticing. "This time," she said, "nobody gets to make you walk alone." We sent out about 210 invitations. Not engraved cards, nothing dramatic. Just simple invitations printed at the library and mailed or handed to people who had been kind. People Graham knew, people from Grace Lutheran, a few VFW regulars, clients from Adler and Pike who had become more like neighbors, and friends of Etta who had known Graham since he was a boy. I did not invite Lyle, Nadine, Sloan, or Dane. But I did not ban them either. The VFW was not my living room. It was a community hall. If they came, they came. I told myself that was fair. I also told myself they would have enough shame to stay away. A few days before the reception, my mother called. Her voice was careful, like she had wrapped it in tissue paper before handing it to me. "Maren, are you really having another wedding party? It is the reception I should have had in October." There was silence on the line. "Should your father and I come?" I closed my eyes. For one foolish second I wanted to say yes. I wanted to make it easy for her. Because some daughters can still feel their mother's discomfort like a command. "You were not invited separately," I said. "But you are not banned. If you come, I am not pretending October 12 did not happen." She breathed in sharply. I almost let her go. Then I asked the question that had been sitting under my tongue for months. "Mom, do you know why Dad called me every month before the wedding?" She did not answer. I heard a clock ticking somewhere on her end. Then she said, "I have to go," and the line went dead. That same evening, Sloan posted again, "Some people need 2 weddings to feel important." Bev Hollis liked it within 10 minutes, but this time, not everyone followed. Ray Sutton had finally brought her bakery records back to Adler and Pike, quiet and embarrassed. And Miles had apparently said enough on my behalf that a few clients were beginning to wonder whether the story being told about me had missing pages. Miles did not tell me to expose anyone. He was too careful for that. He only stopped by my office the Thursday before the reception, leaned against the doorframe, and said, "Numbers do not defend themselves unless somebody brings them into the room." I looked at the Navy folder on my desk. "I'm not planning to use it. I know. I don't want this to be a trap." He nodded. "Then don't make it one. Carry it like an umbrella. You don't have to open it unless it starts raining." So I packed the folder. Inside were the save the date from June, Sloan's birthday bash post from September 15, my bank transfer history from June 2018 through October 2024, the total that came close to $96,000, the public HELOC lien for $42,000, screenshots of Dane's Ford F-150, Sloan's salon chairs, the property tax notice, and one clean timeline. My records. Public posts, nothing stolen, nothing private, nothing I could not stand behind. On April 12, 2025, VFW Post NAS 9148 smelled like coffee, sheet cake, floor polish, and the faint old smoke that never quite leaves a building even decades after people stop smoking inside. Tori had set up round tables with white plastic covers. There were paper plates stacked near the cake, iced tea in big dispensers, and children weaving between chairs while old country songs played low through borrowed speakers. 187 people came. Not 200 exactly, but close enough that the room felt full every time I looked up. Pastor Helen Greer hugged me near the coffee station. Harlan Price, the retired mail carrier who had lived next to my parents for years, shook Graham's hand. Meera Patel from Rite Aid came with her sister and kissed Etta on the cheek. Caroline Keene was there too, because in a county like ours, the woman who helped people find records also somehow knew everyone's mother-in-law. Miles stood near the back with a cup of coffee, watching the room like he was reading a ledger no one else could see. I wore the dress Etta had fixed. It was still simple, still mine, but it fit differently now. Or maybe I did. For the first time since October, I felt like I could stand in white without feeling like a fool. Then the front door opened. The room did not go silent all at once. It dimmed like conversation had been turned down by an invisible hand. My father walked in first, stiff-backed and pale. My mother followed, eyes red and fixed on the floor. Sloane came behind them in a red dress, just bright enough to announce itself, with Dane beside her turning the key ring to his Ford F-150 around one finger. Little Poppy walked between the adults, confused by the weight in the room. Sloane's eyes found my dress first, then Etta in the front row. Then the faces turning toward her, she smiled, sweet as frosting and twice as cold. Wow, she said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. 2 weddings and still playing victim. My hand moved to the folder inside my bag. I did not pull it out, not yet, because even then, some small tired part of me hoped my family would not choose to lie in front of the whole room. Chapter 5. Sloane did not disappoint me. She stepped farther into VFW post 9148, smiling like she had just walked into a room that owed her something and said, "You really needed a second wedding to make Mom and Dad look bad?" The old country song playing through the borrowed speakers seemed to shrink under her voice. A few people near the cake table turned fully around. Graham's hand brushed the small of my back, not pushing, not leading, just reminding me he was there. Dane gave a short laugh and spun the key ring around his finger. Must be nice. Cutting off your disabled father and then throwing yourself a party. My mother whispered, "Maren, don't do this here." I looked at her, and for a second I saw the woman I used to run to when I scraped my knees. Then I saw the woman who had stood beside a birthday cake while my front row sat empty. "I didn't start this here," I said. Sloane folded her arms. "No, you started it. When you picked my birthday weekend for your wedding. And then punished everyone, because we didn't let you erase what I've been through." There it was. The version she had been selling for 6 months. I reached into my bag, but I did not pull out the whole folder yet. I took one breath, then another. "You can dislike me," I said. "You can resent me. But you don't get to lie about October 12 in the room where my wedding should have been celebrated." Sloane's face hardened. "After losing June, I asked for one day. One day where I didn't have to be the sad sister, and you couldn't even let me have that." The room softened at June's name. I felt it. I understood it. June had been real. A baby girl Sloane and Dane had loved and buried before they ever got to bring her home. So I kept my voice quiet. "June was real. Your grief was real. I will never compare my wedding to the child you lost. But grief does not give you permission to rewrite a calendar." I pulled out the first page. My save the date from June 2024. Then the screenshot of Sloane reacting to it. Then her September 15 post announcing her all-day birthday bash on October 12. "Your birthday is October 9, I said. "You knew my wedding date in June. You chose October 12 in September." A murmur moved through the room. Sloane's eyes flashed. "You always have paperwork. I work in taxes," I said. "Paperwork is usually where the truth survives." She tried to pivot. "Fine, you want truth? You abandoned Mom and Dad the second you got a husband." Before I could answer, Harlan Price cleared his throat near the coffee station. Harlan was 72, a retired mail carrier who had lived beside my parents longer than Sloane had been alive. He stepped forward slowly, both hands around a foam cup. "That girl didn't abandon anybody," he said. "I saw Maren mowing that yard when Lyle's back went out. Saw her bring groceries. Saw her sit in her car after dropping things off because Lyle was too proud to ask her inside. Back in February of 2023, when that pipe burst under their kitchen sink, she was the one there after dark waiting on the plumber." Dad looked at the floor. Sloane snapped, "That doesn't mean she paid for everything." Miles Adler moved then. He did not rush. He did not perform. He just stepped beside me, holding his coffee like we were in a client meeting. "I'm not here to disclose anyone's private business," he said. "But Maren has records from her own account. Her money, her transfers. That is hers to show." I opened the folder and took out the bank history. My hands did not shake. That surprised me. "June 2018 through October 2024, I said. "House support, escrow gaps, tax shortages, insurance shortfalls, and medical gaps when they hit too hard." About $1,260 a month by the end, nearly $96,000 total. The room went very still. Mom looked at Dad. She paid the house? Dad said nothing. His silence did more than any confession could have. I looked at my mother. I thought you knew some of it. I didn't know he kept all of it from you. Dad finally lifted his head. You helped a little. A little help doesn't last 6 years. Dane shifted backward just one step, but I saw it. Sloane saw it too. I took out the public lien record next. Someone near the back muttered, "Isn't that private bank information?" Caroline Keene spoke from near Etta's table, calm and clear. A recorded lien is public record. Anyone can request it at the county recorder's office. I nodded. This is not private banking information. It's a public HELOC record. I held up the page. Recorded March 2024, $42,000. Secured against 1186 County Road 7. Borrowers and cosigners, Maren Calloway and Dane Mercer. Mom's mouth parted. You signed a loan with Dane? She asked Dad. I was going to tell you, he said. When? He had no answer. Dane tried to recover. Her name isn't on the deed. She has no right to act like that house is hers. For the first time all evening, I almost smiled. You're right, I said. I don't own that house, that's why I stopped paying for it. The silence after that was different, not shocked anymore, settled. I laid out the timeline, not as an accusation, but as simple order. HELOC in March. Dane's Ford F-150 post in April. Sloane's new salon chairs that same month. The little corner of an invoice she had accidentally filmed beside her coffee cup. I don't need a banker to tell me where the money went, I said. You showed everyone yourselves. Sloane's face crumpled. You don't know what it felt like after June. I know you lost something no mother should lose, I said. But I lost myself trying to make sure no one else in this family fell apart, and you let them call that abandonment. Meera Patel spoke softly from behind Etta. I won't discuss anyone's medical details. But I will say this. There were months when Maren quietly showed up when things got expensive and uncomfortable. Dad whispered, I needed you. I looked at him then. Really looked. No, I said. You needed my money. You never learned how to need me. Mom started crying, but not the way she cried when she wanted someone to rush in and fix things. This was quieter, smaller. The sound of a woman realizing she had been comforted by the wrong daughter's story. Etta stood beside me, one hand near my elbow. Graham stayed on my other side. Neither of them spoke for me. They did not have to. I closed the folder halfway. I am not paying the mortgage anymore. I am not paying the HELOC. I am not paying for a truck, salon chairs, or any debt tied to Sloane and Dane. If Dad needs basic medical help, I will look at a real bill one at a time, with no guilt and no secrets. But the automatic transfers are over. Sloane grabbed Poppy's hand and walked out first, red dress flashing between the tables. Poppy looked back once, wide-eyed and confused, and for a second my anger softened around the edges. She had not chosen any of this. She was just a little girl being pulled through the wreckage adults had made. Dane followed, his face burning as people looked from him to the Ford key ring still hanging from his fingers. Dad and Mom stayed for a few seconds longer. Dad looked like he wanted to say something that pride still would not let him form. Mom looked at me like she was seeing the bank statements behind my face. Then they left through the side door. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Etta walked to the sound system and pressed play. The song Graham and I had chosen for our first dance 6 months earlier filled the hall, soft and worn and familiar. Graham held out his hand. This time, I was not being rescued. I was not being carried. I placed my hand in his because I wanted to. We danced in front of a room that finally knew the truth. The 2 empty chairs did not own the memory anymore. In the weeks after, Dad had to work with Ashford County Savings to refinance the HELOC without me. Dane either had to sell the Ford F-150 or refinance his part of the debt himself. Sloane had to pay for her salon equipment from her own booth income, and people in town stopped accepting her tears as proof. Mom sent me a handwritten letter. She did not ask for money. She did not blame me. She wrote that she had mistaken visible presents for love, and ignored the kind that arrived quietly every month before the due date. Race Sutton came back to Adler and Pike with her bakery records. Miles moved forward with the sale. By late summer, the sign on the door read Calloway Tax and Ledger. For once, the name Calloway belonged to something I had built, not something my family used to pull me back with guilt. A few months later, we had Sunday dinner at our house on Maple Hollow Road. Etta brought rolls. Graham grilled chicken on the porch. Mom and Dad knocked before they came in. They did not sit at the head of the table. They did not bring bills. Sloane was not ready to come. But she sent Poppy with a small card for Graham, and that was enough to tell me the truth had started doing its slow work. I keep the County Road 7 records folder in the bottom drawer of my new office. Not because I want to keep fighting. Because sometimes people only stop calling you selfish when you finally have enough paper to prove you loved them, until it nearly emptied you. So tell me, was I cruel for stopping the payments, or was I finally done being used? If you were in my place, where would you draw the line?